Hope and planning are different. You can hope for profits, but you'll be lucky if they come. It's better to plan for profits, both in earning them and in spending them, what you do with them. My guest today works with private practice owners and others as a financial advisor to figure out both the earning part and the spending part, and he's going to tell us what he thinks. I'm Carl White, principal at Mark Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Usually that's what they want anyway, but care is better when the provider owns the practice because that's when the provider is going to have the most freedom to make the clinical decisions and business decisions that they think are best. It's just not quite the same when somebody else owns the practice because eventually their agenda is going to creep in. It's more for the provider to think about. Let's just keep it easy, keep it simple, and help keep them private. My guest today is Eric Miller. Eric has served over 20 years in the financial industry and co-owns a national financial planning company dedicated to serving the needs of healthcare owners called Econologics Financial Advisors. He has personally had over 20,000 conversations with practice owners at every phase of ownership. He has published countless articles, videos, and podcasts on various financial topics and is an expert on matters concerning creating economic independence for a practice owner's business and household. He has recently published a book called How to Become a Financial Beast, which quickly became a bestseller on Amazon. Eric, thanks for taking some time out to come on PracticeCare.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Carl.
Yes, and we're going to jump right in. Listeners know by now where I'm going to start. It's more about you. That bio is short. That's what I asked for. Help us get to know you a bit better. Take us wherever you want to go. Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll just start back in 2008 because that's when we made the decision to start our firm.
Hell of a year.
That was it was not a smart year to start a financial planning company. That's for sure. But I guess all good stories, have a kind of a turbulent beginning, don't they? And that was a year we were just like, look, we want to, we know we want to work with entrepreneurs and healthcare owners. It was the niche that we decided to work with. I had a background in that. And, I knew that most of these people in this field love to heal, but they were never really taught how to handle money. And we started there. And I learned really early on, though, that if we were going to be any good at giving personal financial advice, that we had to know something about their biggest investment, which turned out to be their practice. And we saw that most of these practices were underutilized, meaning that the cash flow, the profits never really seemed to channel to the owner personally in the volume or the amounts that we thought that they should for them to really, create personal financial independence. So that's where we just started, and we immersed ourselves in understanding, how does a healthcare practice work? What are the profit margins? Where are the expenses at? Where are things that you can improve the value? And how do you treat it more like an investment and not just a job?
Yeah.
And that's where it morphed from there.
A couple of follow-up questions. I'm curious, in the year 2008, the massive Great Recession, had it started the Great Recession when you were saying, let's do this, or you were just, I don't know, you launched in January and I forget what time of year that was.
I think it was starting. I don't think anybody knew really what was happening at that point in time, but it was certainly starting. I think the stock market had started to dip, and banks were tightening, and all the other responses and the whole meltdown on the subprimes were starting to come out. So yeah,
Stearns was like the first casualty, right?
Yeah, they were a huge brokerage firm.
Jesus, and there's just one day they were gone. Yeah,
that's it.
That's it. Yeah, and then the other follow-up question, you said, that you thought you felt that practices weren't either earning the margins or getting them back out. Do you mean, they weren't earning what you thought they could earn, or it was just they were earning it, but it was kind of sloshing around, sloppily inside the practice and it wasn't getting to an efficient out? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, when I guess I had this idea that when I started working with doctors or healthcare people, they'd have all this money and they would be great clients and there would be tons of money for us to, show them how to allocate and invest. And that just really wasn't the case. And we looked at what the source of their money was, which of course was their practice. And we saw just a, quagmire of how money was handled, there's a pretty high rate of embezzlement and people stealing money in these practices, and the profit margins just weren't. I was like, I mean, these profit margins should be higher. Why aren't they?
Mhm.
And so there was a number of things that we looked at, and it was become apparent pretty quickly that most of these owners weren't very good CFOs. They were
Yeah.
more on the practitioner side, and they weren't very sophisticated when it came to financial knowledge.
Yeah. And not a sentence in pick your, medical school, dental school, pick what, not a sentence on the business side. And I've known that going in, and I had one guest come on, it was a couple of years ago. He said, Carl, in medical school, they never said that earning money from treating patients was dirty, bad, and, ugly. But that's exactly the message that you got, let alone here's what a financial statement looks like. And it's got me kind of, I don't know, I get kind of more than annoyed because every school is going to graduate, for every 100 medical school graduates, X% are going to go open a practice, which is a business. And you're not just ignoring it, you're setting just a really bad, it really bothers me, it really bothers me. Um, that's as far as I've gotten, let alone trying to
Yeah.
do something about it. But I'm more than annoyed at, screw you, man. You want to have your opinions about earning money, which, by the way, you're a well compensated six-figure professor. Um, what the hell,
I, I
set
I
these
don't know
people
what.
up better.
Yeah, I don't know where they got taught that, but it is pretty fascinating to watch practice owners that actually feel bad about making money.
Mhm.
And I have to reiterate this point to them. Start almost all my talks with. I was like, hey, you having money is virtuous, it's righteous, and it's divine. It's like it.
Mhm.
I can't think of a better group of people to have money than people that are healing others. You guys need to have money and have that viewpoint.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see where it comes from. You got staff, you have patients, and yeah, it just, oh, you're only in it for the money. You only care about the money. And they just don't really see all the risk that an owner takes
No, they don't.
and all the things they have to do in order to keep that organization solvent and standing there so that it can see patients. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with you.
Let alone happy to show up every day, right?
Yes,
I
right.
mean, the business owner, industry agnostic, who's barely breaking even, is not a happy camper, and probably they're not going to do as good of a job, you know, than if they're anyway. So we could go on and on. So let's jump into it. So we're talking about planning our
Mhm.
profits, and I open by saying hope and planning are different, and they are. For you, what is the difference between hoping for something and planning for it?
Well, hoping for something is basically saying that you don't really have much cause over the outcome, and it's just
Yeah,
going to be a wing and a prayer. And if it works, great, and if not, I'm not really sure. So hope is like, I guess looking at it from a statistical perspective or probabilities, it's just like a low probability outcome. Like, I don't know. And
yeah,
planning, is doesn't guarantee success, but it certainly increases the probabilities that you're going to have what it is that you set out for. So,
yeah,
to me, I think that's probably the biggest difference between the two is that you
yeah.
increase your probabilities of outcome when you have
Yeah.
planning.
Yeah. I've always thought of it as, hope in life is essential. Sometimes that's all that's left and
Right.
everything else, but you can't do anything to make hope become more probable or go faster or skew it in any particular direction, right? You can't. It comes if it comes and it doesn't if it doesn't. But planning's the opposite, right? Just like you said, you can choose certain things, you can try to make it go faster, you can try to use it to influence the outcome. But there's a lot of people out there who just, I hope it happens. But have you
Yeah.
done anything to make it happen? I don't think so. Well then, okay. Hope it works. Hope it
Takes a
works for you.
combination.
Yeah.
Definitely takes a combination of the two. You have to
Yeah.
have both, but I mean, I think hope just makes it seem like that there is a brighter future.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't even have that right now. So,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And there's a big mindset difference between being, I guess a hoper and a planner. What do you see as that? Like if you want to be a planner, your mindset needs to be what? What would you say?
it's action. It is, I think of the mindset of like what a good CFO thinks about.
Hmm.
And, they of course they want the organization to do well, but they also do certain things in the
Hmm.
organization. And I think it's just a mindset of there are things that we have control over. There are habits, there are systems that we have control over. And again, it doesn't guarantee that we're going to have a good outcome, but man, I'm going to go down at least swinging and
Mm-hmm.
knowing that I did certain things that are, in alignment with good business principles that will allow this organization to function really well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get maximum production from my associates. I'm going to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna confront the financial statements. I don't need to be an expert. I'm not an expert in algorithmic accounting, but I'm just gonna understand, like, where are we? What percentages should I have in, these certain expense buckets? I'm just
Mm-hmm.
gonna confront these things. So it's just things like that that I think allow someone to feel like they can do something about it, as opposed to the person that's just like, oh well, it's just all the external factors are too much for me to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
Can't win the game.
Mm-hmm.
And those are probably the hardest people to consult and work with.
Yeah, and I would say to those people, look around. You've got all sorts of other successful practices, at least seemingly successful. And one of the reasons why is because they are planning, right? I mean, they have
Yeah.
their finger on the pulse. And so it was a good segue in. Success versus failure. Like, what if you had to pick the handful of major levers that any practice owner ought to think about when they think about planning? You hit about production, you hit on a couple, and what would you say they are from your experience?
Meaning, like, what does success look like? Or
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
And if you had to like break it down into like some, like you talked about, get the most out of your staff. That's a poor paraphrase of what you said, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I think when we're looking at, like, what does financial success look like in a practice? Um, and again, financial success isn't just always about a number either.
mhm,
It's like it's a condition. Like, how is my organization running? But
mhm,
it does start with the profit margin. I mean, I think if you're running a good organization, there should be an excess, a surplus that allows you to expand and allows you to compensate yourself correctly. So I
mhm,
certainly would look at that. I think that would be an indicator of success. How fast you're growing, your growth rate.
mhm,
I think that's extremely important. And,
mhm.
in our survey of buyers of practices, that is a very, very vital
Sure.
statistic that they look at to say, all right, if you want to have something of investment value here, you better have something that is seeing new patients continually and
Mhm,
is growing.
mhm,
And I think the third thing that really drives value in a practice, or I would say would be success, is the actual team and
mhm,
the culture. And or do people like to be there, and are they
mhm,
acknowledged, and is there a system to reward people that are doing well? And
mhm,
I think those are really the three big things that I would look at to say, am I achieving success in my practice? And
mhm,
I think coincidentally, those are the biggest drivers of value of a business as well. Like, if I'm
mhm.
going to go get my practice valued, those are three things that people are going to look at
Yeah.
with anything else.
Yeah. And even if you're not, right? I mean, those are, as you say them, they sound, they would bubble to the top of anybody's list.
For
You've got
sure.
a healthy, thriving practice is one in which you can say those three things. So is the failure then, if you say, what does failure look like? Is it just the opposite of those three things?
Pretty much. It would just be, I think failure, to me, failure just equates to chaos and confusion.
Hmm.
So when you're unsure about certain things, where you can't build an empire on chaos.
No.
It's almost, yeah. So you have to make sure that, like I said, the exact opposite of that would be, I'm not profitable. I hate my staff. I want to get rid of everybody. I
Hmm.
don't want to hire anyone because, I mean, just that kind of an attitude.
Hmm.
And, we're not seeing new patients, and that's a marketing thing.
Hmm.
I think a lot of practice owners severely underestimate the amount of marketing that they need to do.
Yeah.
to get to where they need to go.
That was not a
And
plug, but talk more about
I was certainly no.
that.
We talk a lot about it with them. You know, in some industries, they don't need to do as much marketing as others just because the
Sure.
demand is there.
Yeah.
But for by and large, you know, how much people are spending on marketing, I'm always looking at their profit and loss statements. I'm like, you're spending out 2%, you know, 1%, 3%.
Hmm.
You got to be at 10% of your revenue should be spent on marketing.
Hmm.
And like, how much? I'm like, yeah. And they don't really look at it as an investment of future growth. And
Hmm.
again, they don't look at how important that growth is to the value of their practice.
Yeah.
And you know, to me, it's very underutilized. And you know, if I'm going to someone's website, I mean, I want to see that it's up to date and current. I want to see
Hmm.
that it's got certain, you know, certain things that make it look attractive and it's not outdated. And you know, someone that's in the marketing, I'm sure you have like a list of things that probably irritate the crap out of you when you go to a practice owner's website and
Yeah. You
or
make your
their
peace with it, but
strategy.
like, oh, there it is
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it really is vital piece to financial success is that
Hmm.
you have to, you know, it's just part of the equation of acquiring money. You know, it's marketing, it's promotion, it's
Hmm.
sales and delivery.
Hmm.
And whether you're in healthcare or you're in software, you still have to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not going to turn this into a marketing episode, but the one thing I want to add to that is you've got to have something that's clearly different and valuable about your practice because you have a lot of competition. Some
Mhm.
have more than others. And so, you know, if you don't have that, you better have the largest marketing budget to have the largest megaphone in your area to shout the same stuff the loudest because it's the only way you're going to be heard. Otherwise, you just sound like everybody else. And so, if you don't have like a real clear difference, which is not always what it seems, it's not usually what it seems when I ask people, "What do you think's different about you?" Oh, we have
Mhm.
the best customer service or we have the most experience. I'm like, well, you're supposed to have the best customer service and nobody can tell what that looks like. Anyway, not to go down this rabbit hole, but you better have something that's clear and compelling and different. Um, Otherwise, yeah, make 10% at least. So it's funny because when I talk to, what's missing, I think of things like the financial side. Are you tracking things? Are you as efficient as you could be? It just seems like so it's funny how I see more about your world, what's missing. You see more about my world, what's
Yeah,
missing.
it is.
Yeah. And then, so you're earning the profits. The other side of this, as we talked about, is there's the earning side, and then there's the what do you do with them side.
Mhm.
Um, that you got to plan for also. I mean,
Correct.
because there's some you pour back into the business, there's some you pour into yourself. So how do you talk about that? Like,
Yeah, sure.
how do you do things smartly with profits and how do you do things stupidly with profits, I guess?
Well, you know, and again, when someone says profit, they think that, oh, that's just all the money that goes into my pocket. And that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
When you're looking at, you know, what's the first target of a profit margin for most practices that we're looking at? I mean, minimum of 20%.
Mhm.
That would be a start. Now, of that of revenue. So, you know, when we start breaking that down, where does that 20%
Do you mean
go?
20 at the like top line or at the like pre-tax bottom line?
That would be the 20% of revenue
Mhm.
would be profit. That would be part of that
So
would
after you've paid everything off, that's what's left.
correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, a portion of that needs to go to you personally,
Mhm.
and that should be for the creation of other income streams outside of the business. Because look, you don't want to be saddled with the business as your only income stream forever. You
Mhm.
want to start creating other income sources outside of the business, whether that's in, you know, stocks and bonds, whether it's in real estate, whatever it is. All
Whatever it
right.
is. Yeah.
You want to start, and the business should be able to provide for that, and that's part of where those profits would go.
Mhm.
Obviously, you're going to the business gives you a tax liability at the end of the year, so you have to make sure that there's money available for you to pay taxes on
Mhm.
the profit that the business gives you personally. So
Mhm.
you have to set aside for that.
Mhm.
I would make sure that you have money setting in the business in some kind of a business savings account of at least 2 to 3 months of business reserves,
Mhm.
because, you know, I mean, things happen.
Things happen.
And
Yeah.
and who knows where, you're going to get shut down for a couple of months or whatever can happen.
Hmm.
And then an expansion account would be reinvestment back into the business, which could mean, training, could be rewards for staff, could be, I'm going to put a down payment on a new location, whatever it is that, or equipment or something like that,
Hmm.
that would allow the business to expand. So it's not like all the money is going to go to the greedy owner. It's, it's broken down intelligently to further expansion of the business, but to also make sure that the owner is taken care of as well.
Okay. What are some just horror stories you've seen? Just people doing not
Yeah.
that.
Yes. Well, I mean, it was almost one for one when we first started, that we would see their margins, and they were like 5% or 3% or
Yeah.
8%. And the horror story is the owner and the emotional effects that has on them,
Hmm.
because it's like, why am I doing all this? Like, to make a 5% rate of return, I can make 5% on treasury bills right now.
Yeah.
So like, why am I enduring all of this if this is what I have left over?
Hmm.
And that to me, it was pretty symptomatic of the burnout that you would hear quite a bit of. I'm just burnt out. I'm tired. I'm
Hmm.
irritated. I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I can see why. You're putting
Hmm.
all this energy and effort towards something, and you're not getting much compensation back for it.
Hmm.
So, maybe if we change that, then you'll feel better about it.
Yeah.
And by and large, that's what we saw, was like, after they started seeing like, oh my gosh, okay, now I can see how this works and I feel better, then they were engaged back into the business. But
What were one or two things you saw in that particular example that you turned 5% into something bigger?
well, I think the simplicity was, a lot of them just didn't have good control. They didn't know like where their money was going.
Mm.
And we start with most people in defining, where's money going to go? It's going to go everywhere, and it will get spent in your organization if you allow it. And
Yes.
that's the simplicity of it. So that's going to happen. And so you have to have some control of where that money's going to go. It starts off where should the money go? Like, when a dollar comes into your organization, you should know where 99 cents of that dollar is going to go.
Hmm.
And it should be carved out into, and we don't get into too many complexities, but basically there's like, we call them four buckets. So you have your practice facility expense bucket, you have your divisional and overhead expense bucket, you have your staff wages, and then you have your profit, right? And
Hmm.
and each of those has a certain percentage of how much should go into there, and that's going to vary from practice to practice, and the
Hmm.
size and
Sure.
demographics and all that. But I mean, that's a starting place right there. And once we open their eyes to them, they can say, oh my gosh, I'm spending 60% on staff wages and I need to be at 45%.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh. I either need to get more production from my staff, or I need to get rid of some people that I probably don't need that are
Hmm.
doing some things, so it opened the door. Same with like cost of goods sold. I mean, who in our organization is ordering 7 months of supplies when, we don't need all of these supplies right now?
Hmm.
And it's just things like that, these little 2% here, 3% here, but it adds up,
Yeah.
and it adds up tremendously. So those are some of the things that, and no one's looking at that. Their bookkeepers aren't looking at that. Their accountants aren't looking at that. Their current
Interesting.
financial advisors aren't looking at that. And that's where I'm, it was very apparent to me, like, you really need an industry specific financial advisor, someone that knows your
Yeah.
business, that like takes an interest, because I want to see people have more profits, because that's more money for me to show them how to invest and do other things.
Hmm.
So it was a win-win.
Yeah. It's a little surprising that the list of professions you just said nobody's looking at. I was taken aback by that. I'm
Yeah.
not surprised at all, though.
No, bookkeepers just are there to reconcile what you're
Yeah,
doing. The CPAs are just going to make sure that your taxes are filed on time. And
for the most part. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, no one's really looking at your profit margin. Oh, we noticed you made some money. Okay, great.
Hmm.
That's really it. There was nothing else. It was very
Yeah.
surprising.
I've even heard stories of accountants who've said to somebody, looks like you got a big profit coming. Why don't you go buy something to have the expense
Oh
so
yeah.
that you don't have as much of a tax bill? Actually, I'm not going to say who, but I've been told that specific story. And this particular practice now has a whole hell of a lot of equipment they have no need for, you
Oh,
know,
well, that you are running
like large
into,
capital equipment, like
yeah.
buku, like not let's order 12 months of supplies instead of 7. It's holy crap. Like,
Oh, we'll get that 20 times a year. We'll hear CPAs say two things. Yeah, you're number one, congratulations, you made a lot of money. Here's your $80,000 tax bill
yeah,
that wasn't planned for.
yeah,
No one talked to him. No one said anything to the owner about it. And the owner's got to take some responsibility there too. I mean, they need to, make sure that they're,
yeah.
looking at that. But then they tell them one of two things. Okay, you can do one of two things. You can pour all this money into, a retirement plan, or you can buy a bunch of stuff that you may or may not need.
Hmm.
We just have a term for that in our office. We just call it lazy tax planning.
Yeah.
And
It's
that's
funny to
pretty
put
much
lazy
it.
and planning together in the same thought.
Yeah. And so yeah, but I think that is a very, very typical response that you'll get from a lot of CPAs.
It's just crazy. It's just crazy. So uh, we've covered a lot of ground and not so much time. So it's a pretty simple concept, hope versus planning, but I
Yeah.
think we've sort of pulled it apart in some useful ways. A couple of wrap-up questions I ask every guest. The first one is, with what we've covered and what we've talked about, is there anything you think I should have asked you, but I just didn't think to ask you?
Well, there was a quote that I heard that, gosh, where did it come from? Maybe it was Thomas Jefferson that said, "A nation that hopes to remain ignorant and free is hoping for something that never was and never shall be." And if you want to have financial freedom, you cannot remain ignorant on the subject of finances.
Hmm.
And again, that doesn't mean that you have to be a expert in, all these technical things. You just have to know some of the basics of
Hmm.
how they work, and how, what my financial statements are, what they're telling me, and having a plan to make sure that I'm, building multiple income streams, I'm getting out of bad debt. I have a plan,
Hmm.
that I'm operating with someone that can guide me on that. I think that's probably, an important thing that most people are missing.
Yeah, yeah. Can it be better, I guess, is really the question.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other wrap-up question I ask is, all right, we've caught a listener's attention. This is the context. And they're like, you know what, that's me. But I just don't know what to do. I want to change this, but I don't know what to do. So sometimes people, Eric, they get really enthusiastic about something, but they just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So if you had to give them one or two super simple things they could do to nudge them off the starting line, what would you say they should do as soon as they're done listening to this?
Well, number one, I would just get in touch with my financial team, like, especially my bookkeeper, my CPA, and just have them sit down and say, look, can you explain all these things to me, like a 5-year old,
Hmm.
just break down what this stuff means, so I can have a better grip and understanding what I'm looking at and why.
Hmm.
And I did have one client that did that. He was just frustrated, and he was just like, I just sat down with I forced my CPA to like go through some of these things just so I had a better understanding of what I'm
Hmm.
looking at.
Hmm.
And I think everyone can probably do. Another thing I would probably do is I would look at my current facility and really understand like what it is that what is the maximum production that I could be doing out of my current facility. Because I will say that a lot of people, when I ask their biggest expense, they say, wages or whatever, and it's lost income. It's money you could have made and you didn't.
Hmm.
And so looking at your facility like an investment, how much could it do? How much are you doing right now? That's the gap that you want to try to minimize. Those are two simple things you can do.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to go back to the first one, just have them explain it to you like a 5-year-old. Because
Hmm.
when you said that, I was thinking, well, how do you know if it's at a 5-year-old level? And listeners, don't take this personally. It's at the level it needs to be when you understand it.
Yeah.
And then maybe ask a follow-up question. Is this where it should be?
Yeah.
And if you get,
Actually, right.
and if you're in pain, like day in and day out, and they say, yeah, I think this is where it should be, or they say, I don't know, I think you need to look around
For sure.
because, you're not supposed to be in pain. You just, you're
No,
not supposed to be.
you may need a new team, and
Yeah.
that means you may have to break up with, the people that, but there are plenty of people in your respective industries that focus on this
Yeah.
that
And
can
this is
help
an,
you.
and I have the occasional chance to make a plug. Please, if you own a practice and you're going to bring in any specialist, whether it's Eric or anybody else, find somebody with a lot of healthcare experience, because the
Mhm.
nature of a business and a private practice is different than a restaurant. It's different than a whatever. There's just different moving parts and different ratios, right? Different expense levels
Correct.
that are good. Um, and how to get it just takes that level of expertise. There's plenty of them out there. Just find, healthcare accounting firm, healthcare financial advising firm, whatever it is, because it's different and you benefit from that experience. So maybe that's one of the couple things you do. What's the healthcare? Am I their only client, or am I,
Yeah.
one of a bunch of clients? And what's the background and the expertise of those who are helping me?
Yeah. I want people that have seen multiple healthcare practices,
Yeah.
because now we get to see the advantage of like, okay, I have a sample size of, 300 healthcare owners here. I'm going to tell you what the ones that are really successful, what they're doing.
Yeah.
And if there's any tricks, or if there's any, which there usually isn't, these are what they're doing to have profits and have a valuable practice. And we can impart that knowledge on to everyone else.
Yeah, all sorts of benefits for that. So please, if that's not part of your advisory team, man, um, life can be a lot better if it is.
Yes.
So that would be my plug. Cool. Well, Eric, thank you for coming on Practice Care and shedding some light on this. We've had a number of folks come on and talk about the financial side of private practice one way or another, and this definitely adds to it. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and you supplied some contact information, which we will get into the show notes for this episode. So anybody who wants to contact you, now they have another way to do it. 2 points before we wrap up. First, if you are someone like Eric or I who seeks to serve private practice owners, or if you're a private practice owner yourself and you've got experience or expertise on the business side of private practice, please, we want you to come on Practice Care and tell the world about it. In the show notes for Eric's episode and every episode, there's a link, a couple of questions, click, super easy, very quick. Tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, please subscribe to Practice Care. We do a new episode every week. The easiest way to stay up to date is to subscribe, set up your notifications, and you're all set to go. Thanks very much. And until next time.